Look, we've all been there. You're trash talking a friend, but you accidentally send the text straight to them. Instead of texting your boss goodbye, you say, I love you. You accidentally send all your active war plans to the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. Whoopsie. Luckily, that party didn't make national security the cornerstone of their existence, because that would be awkward.
If there was anyone other than Hillary Clinton, they would be in jail right now.
But this month, the president's highly qualified team of national security experts got together on Signal for a super secret conversation about a military strike in Yemen, and they invited a journalist from The Atlantic into the text thread. No, this wasn't a rare effort to create more transparency by an administration that seems bent on secrecy, nor was it an effort to reach out to the so-called liberal media that Trump has banned from the White House press room. Instead, it was a colossal, monumental screw-up. Compliments of Michael Waltz, the president's national security advisor, and seemingly the entire Trump cabinet, including Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and Vice President JD Vance. This is a national embarrassment and an unbelievable breach of national security. So what happened and how illegal is it? Well, apparently on March 11th, Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, received a Signal chat invite from someone who shared a name with President Trump's national security advisor, Michael Waltz. Mr. Goldberg wasn't sure if it was really that Michael Waltz, but he was hopeful that it actually was the national security advisor and that Waltz might want to discuss Ukraine, Iran, or some other important national security-related matter. So Goldberg accepted the chat request. Jeffrey Goldberg had good reason to be skeptical that President Trump's national security advisor would reach out to him for a friendly chat because Mr. Goldberg has been the subject of Donald Trump's ire since at least 2020. In 2020, Mr. Goldberg attracted Trump's attention with a story he wrote reporting that Mr. Trump had called members of the American military who died in war suckers and losers. Then last year, Mr. Goldberg reported that Mr. Trump had said, quote, I need the kind of generals that Hitler had. In response, then candidate Trump called The Atlantic a, quote, failing magazine run by a guy named Goldberg. So it was weird that Waltz had reached out, but things were about to get weirder still. 2 days later, the person purporting to be Michael Waltz added Jeffrey Goldberg to a Signal group chat called Houthi PC Small Group. Now, first, a brief explanation about Signal. It is an open source encrypted messaging app popular with people who want more privacy than the average text messaging apps provide. It is not, however, approved by any government agency for the transmission of secret or classified information. Signal allows users to set deletion deadlines for text messages, so all messages will be automatically deleted once a specified amount of time has passed, which also makes it ill-suited for government work because deleting messages is a violation of federal records laws. But we'll talk more about that later. Now, soon after inviting Mr. Goldberg, the putative Michael Waltz texted the Houthi PC small group and said, quote, team establishing a principals group for coordination on Houthis. Waltz was presumably referring to a principals committee spelled P-R-I-N-C-I-P-A-L-S, not P-R-I-N-C-I-P-L-E-S, which is a group of the senior-most national security officials, including secretaries of defense, state, and the treasury, as well as the director of the CIA. But honestly, the typo was probably the least of their worries. If Waltz was looking to find principals LES in this administration, he's probably out of luck. But Waltz's statement about starting a principals group also raised red flags for Mr. Goldberg. As Goldberg pointed out in The Atlantic, quote, it should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that I have never been invited to a White House Principals Committee meeting, and that in my many years of reporting on national security matters, I've never heard of one being convened over a commercial messaging app. Nonetheless, Waltz asked the other group members in the chat to identify the best people on their staff for Waltz to coordinate with. Mr. Goldberg watched as several group members, which appeared to include White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President JD Vance, I still can't believe it, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and numerous others chime in, volunteering various members on their staff. Even the director of the Central Intelligence Agency offered to name an active CIA intelligence officer. And Mr. Goldberg couldn't believe that the top national security officials would really engage in an unsecured group chat, let alone carelessly include a journalist in the chat, so he quite reasonably assumed that this was some kind of elaborate hoax or disinformation campaign. He watched, though, as a surreal policy conversation unfolded between these supposed Trump administration officials as they discussed on Signal how and when to stage an attack on the Houthis and how to message to the public about the attack. As a lawyer, one of the more interesting legal aspects of it is that Goldberg makes it clear throughout this article that at no time did he possess the requisite mens rea to be liable for possessing national security information himself. Obviously, a lawyer read this piece before it went live. But on the morning of March 14th, Michael Waltz texted the group stating, quote, team, you should have a statement of conclusions with taskings per the president's guidance this morning in your high side inboxes. High side, by the way, is a special segregated computer or communication system, which is specifically set up to manage classified or sensitive information. Unlike Signal, high side systems must comply with the rigorous requirements and are specifically designed to protect sensitive information from cyber threats. So Waltz's message indicates that the information being discussed was sensitive enough to merit the use of these super secret, secure computer systems. And we can surmise the president's high-side message apparently instructed the United States military to strike the Houthis, an Iran-backed terrorist organization that had been attacking cargo ships in the Red Sea. J.D. Vance, who so far publicly has made a point of genuflecting to everything that President Trump has said, interestingly appeared to actually disagree with the president's instruction. Vance responded, quote, "I think we are making a mistake," end quote. "I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now." What Vance was referring to was Trump's policy of abandoning our European allies by refusing to provide any more American-funded support for them. Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, disagreed with Vance, stating, quote, "If I had a final go or no-go vote, I believe we should." Vance replied saying, quote, "If you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again." As an aside, one of the most terrifying, but perhaps not strictly speaking, legal issues here is that these people are deciding to bomb another country, and they don't have clear instructions from the President of the United States. Not great. But Hegseth agreed with Vance's sentiments regarding America's European allies, proclaiming, quote, "VP, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. But Mike is correct. We are the only ones on the planet, on our side of the ledger, who can do this." Then SM, who Mr. Goldberg assumed was White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, chimed in, stating, quote, "As I heard it, the president was clear, green light, but we should soon make clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. We also need to figure out how to enforce such a requirement. E.g., if Europe doesn't remunerate, then what? If the US successfully restores freedom of navigation at great cost, there needs to be some further economic gain extracted in return." At this point, Mr. Goldberg says he still remained unconvinced that these were really the nation's top national security and defense officials arguing policy in a Signal chat without ever taking the time to consider who else was in the chat. The next day, though, Secretary of Defense Hegseth sent the Houthi PC small group chat a very specific message about the attack that would take place that afternoon in Yemen, including operational details like targets, weapons that would be deployed, and attack sequencing. Vice President Vance replied, quote, "I will say a prayer for victory." 2 hours later, at the time when Hegseth had specified the attacks would begin, Mr. Goldberg waited in his car at a grocery store parking lot. He checked Twitter and confirmed that at that moment explosions were being heard all across Sana'a, the capital city of Yemen. And back in the Houthi PC small group chat, the leaders of the US were celebrating with exclamations and emojis. They then moved on to discussing assessments of damage done, including the likely death of a specific individual. At this point, Mr. Goldberg had come to the startling conclusion that the Signal group chat really was populated by the leaders of US intelligence agencies who were openly discussing presumptively classified and sensitive national defense information on an unapproved channel. He removed himself from the group, which triggered an automatic notification to the group's creator, Michael Waltz. No one seemed to notice, and no one followed up with Mr. Goldberg about his presence and subsequent absence from the group. Now, if you're using an unsecured device to discuss classified and national defense information with the editor of The Atlantic, you'll probably want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, let my law firm, the Eagle Team, help. If you've gotten in a car crash, suffered a data breach, especially if you got a data breach letter saying your information might have been leaked, or dealing with a workers' comp or social security issue, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. And by the way, we don't get paid unless you do, so there's nothing up front. So just click on the link in the description or call the phone number that's on screen right now for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle Team. Boy, do these guys need a good lawyer. Mr. Goldberg later privately emailed several members of the group to inform them that he had been mistakenly included in the Signal chat and to ask about whether the chat was genuine. Brian Hughes, spokesman for the National Security Council, replied back saying, quote, "This appears to be an authentic message chain." Hughes tried to spin the story, arguing that, quote, "The thread is a demonstration of the deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials." John Ratcliffe, head of the CIA, also later authenticated the text thread in a hearing before Congress.
So you were the John Ratcliffe on that chat?
I was.
Thank you, thank you.
And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who some have now started to call whiskey leaks, apparently did not get the memo the administration had owned up to the text chain because in a conversation with reporters, he said, quote,
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration.
And J.D. Vance's spokesperson confirmed that Vance had returned to his usual spineless fetal position, saying, quote, "Vice President Vance unequivocally supports this administration's foreign policy. The president and vice president have had subsequent conversations about this matter and are in complete agreement." And when asked about the Houthi PC small group chat in a meeting on March 24th, President Trump gave a characteristically thoughtful and level-headed response.
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it.
And Mike Hot Dog Man Waltz vowed to get to the bottom of how Goldberg could have possibly gotten on the text chain after Waltz had added him to the text chain.
It's embarrassing, yes. We're going to get to the bottom of it. I just talked to Elon on the way here. We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened.
And it's me, Devin, from the future. Tulsi Gabbard testified under oath that there were no war plans discussed, and whatever was discussed wasn't classified. And White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt also leaned into a typo-ridden response and claimed there were no war plans discussed, but she still objected to the release of the full text. So Jeffrey Goldberg just released the entire text message chain. And yeah, it's basically exactly what he described, inclusive of a whole bunch of classified top-secret war plans. As Goldberg wrote, on the day of the attack, Saturday, March 15th, the discussion veered toward the operational. At 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time, Hegseth posted in the chat, in all caps, Team Update. The text beneath this began, time now, 11:44 ET, weather is favorable, just confirmed with CENTCOM we are go for a mission launch. CENTCOM, or Central Command, is the military's combatant command for the Middle East. The Hegseth text continues, 12:45 ET, F-18's launch, first strike package. 13:45, trigger-based F-18 first strike window starts. Target terrorist is at his known location, so should be on time. Also, strike drones launch MQ-9s, and Goldberg opines, if this text has been received by someone hostile to American interests or someone merely indiscreet and with access to social media, the Houthis could have had time to prepare for what was meant to be a surprise attack on their strongholds. The consequences for American pilots could have been catastrophic. The Hegseth text then continued. 14:10, more F-18s launch, second strike package. 14:15, strike drones on target. This is when the first bombs will definitely drop, pending earlier trigger-based targets. 15:36, F-18 second strike starts. Also, first sea-based Tomahawks launched. More to follow per timeline. We are currently clean on OPSEC. Godspeed to our warriors. But to say this isn't classified or sensitive national defense information is to make the joke from Airplane real.
My orders came through. My squadron ships out tomorrow. We're bombing the storage depots at Daiquiri at 1800 hours. We're coming in from the north, below their radar.
When will you be back?
I can't tell you that. It's classified.
Following what are obviously war plans, there's a bunch of self-congratulation and real-time intelligence, including at 2 p.m. Walsh responds, the first target, their top missile guy, we had positive ID of him walking into his girlfriend's building, it's now collapsed. Vance responded a minute later, excellent. 35 minutes after that, Ratcliffe, the CIA director, wrote, a good start, which Waltz followed with a text containing a fist emoji, an American flag emoji, and a fire emoji. The Houthi-run Yemeni Health Ministry reported that at least 53 people were killed in the strikes, a number that has not been independently verified. Steve Witkoff replied, prayer emoji, arm emoji, American flag emoji. The timing is also incredible. Goldberg released the first article the day of the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing on worldwide threats, which allowed Gabbard and Ratcliffe to be grilled just hours after the release. And because these are the dumbest people, their denials allowed Goldberg to release the full text chain the next morning and allow Gabbard and Ratcliffe to be grilled again in the second day of the hearing. And they did not disappoint.
So it's your testimony that less than 2 weeks ago, you were on a Signal chat that had all of this information about F-18s and MQ-9 Reapers and targets on strike, and you in that 2-week period simply forgot that that was there. That's your testimony?
My testimony is I did not recall the exact details of what was included there.
That was not your testimony. Your testimony was that you were not aware of anything related to weapons packages, targets, and timing.
But experts, lawmakers, and honestly anyone with a brain were very alarmed when Mr. Goldberg's story broke on The Atlantic because the unauthorized release of classified or sensitive material is a serious crime. As Signal chat participant and Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard pointed out on Twitter just a few weeks ago. Now, there are two especially large legal issues with this Signal group chat. The first is the issue of carelessly sharing classified or sensitive information with an unvetted outsider. Now, I was surprised when I saw this story, so I reached out to our resident military law expert, Spencer the Scowl. Now, Spencer, you've been actively deployed in combat before, and you've actually ordered airstrikes yourself, right?
Yeah, Devin, that's correct. I was a JTAC in Western Iraq, and I dropped many warheads on ISIS foreheads.
And what are your thoughts here? Can you text active war plans to a journalist over an unsecured app on a personal phone?
What the
My thoughts exactly. Now, when the Trump National Security Team carelessly included Mr. Goldberg in their Signal chat, they likely violated the Espionage Act, which protects documents, materials, or information related to national defense. But don't worry, Donald Trump knows a thing or two about unauthorized disclosure of national defense information. Oh my God. But the Espionage Act, 18 U.S.C. Section 793F, makes it illegal for someone who lawfully possesses information relating to national defense to allow that information to be released through unauthorized parties through gross negligence. Michael Waltz carelessly added Mr. Goldberg to the group chat without ever bothering to confirm who he was or ask whether he was cleared to receive that information. that certainly seems grossly negligent. That same provision of law, section 793F, also specifies that if someone who lawfully possesses information relating to the national defense finds out that the information has been wrongly shared with an unauthorized person, they have to report that leak. It's notable that even after Mr. Goldberg emailed several of the people on the Houthi PC small group chat to inform them of his accidental inclusion, it doesn't appear as though anyone acted on the information, but they were legally obligated to under section 793F. Both of these violations of 793F carry the possibility of a fine of up to 10 years of imprisonment. And in a contentious hearing the day after the Goldberg article came out, CIA Director John Ratcliffe confirmed that it was indeed him in that Signal chat. Director Ratcliffe, along with the director of the Office of National Intelligence, I still can't believe it, Tulsi Gabbard, claimed that the information exchanged in that chat, which again included specific attack plans, wasn't classified, and thus none of this was a problem.
So my communications, to be clear, in a Signal message group were entirely permissible and lawful and did not include classified information.
Well, we will make that determination, because if it's not classified, share the text with the committee.
Now, that's not necessarily true, though, because neither provision of 793F requires that the leaked information be classified. The information just has to be related to the national defense. Specific times, dates, locations, and weapons used in attacks would certainly seem to fit into the ordinary understanding of sensitive information related to the national defense. Senators, including Senator Mark Warner, vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, weren't buying their arguments.
There was no classified material that was shared in that
So then,
Signal
if there was no
chat.
classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security. Bobbing and weaving and trying to, filibuster your answer. So please answer the question.
And the argument that improperly handled information wasn't actually classified has been tried before, by Hillary Clinton when the Republicans were hounding her about the emails before the 2016 election. So it's odd that Republicans are making the same argument now. And as Pete Hegseth pointed out during a 2016 appearance on Fox News,
if there was anyone other than Hillary Clinton, they would be in jail right now.
Marco Rubio, who also appeared to be included in the Houthi PC small group chat, also criticized Hillary Clinton for her information handling practices.
He was less than truthful about it repeatedly. And it goes to the issue of both competence and credibility. It is irresponsible for an elected official in her capacity to be discussing highly sensitive things on a format that she had to have known was not fully secured.
Now, the Espionage Act protects not only important national security interests, but also the lives of allies and members of the U.S. military and intelligence community. Military experts pointed at the obvious danger created by the Trump team's carelessness. The plans leaked by Secretary of Defense Hegseth contained details about attack locations and timing, which, had they fallen into enemy hands, could have put service members at risk. And the CIA director named an active CIA agent, which also could have put that person at risk. And Goldberg also refrained from publishing excerpts that he deemed particularly sensitive. And here Ratcliffe and Gabbard are seemingly daring him to release the rest of the text messages. Senator Jack Reed, ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, said, quote, "If true, the story represents one of the most egregious failures of operational security and common sense I've ever seen. Military operations need to be handled with utmost discretion, using approved secure lines of communication, because American lives are on the line. The carelessness shown by President Trump's cabinet is stunning and dangerous. I'll be seeking answers from the administration immediately." Senator Tammy Duckworth, a veteran, was unsparing in her criticism of Secretary of State Hegseth, in particular saying, quote, "Pete Hegseth, the most unqualified Secretary of Defense in history, is demonstrating his incompetence by literally leaking classified war plans in the group chat. Hegseth and Trump are making our country less safe." But that's not all. Now, the second legal issue raised by the Houthi PC small group Signal chat is the use of Signal at all for this purpose. The use of Signal itself potentially implicates another provision in the Espionage Act, 18 U.S.C. section 793D, which makes it illegal for lawful possessors of national security information to willfully transmit that information in a way that could allow an unauthorized person to obtain it. Signal is known to be insecure. In fact, the Department of Defense recently issued a warning about Signal's insecurity. That warning stated explicitly that Signal can only be used for, quote, "unclassified accountability recall exercises, but are not approved to process or store non-public unclassified information. Typically, classified or sensitive information has to be conveyed only in high-side systems. And there are specific DoD platforms that are used for classified and secret communications. One, called the Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communications System, is a top-secret network used to gather and analyze data. The other, called the Secret Internet Protocol Router Network, is used for day-to-day communication and information sharing of secret information. The government has specifically designed systems for handling sensitive information because traditional cell phones are quite insecure. Foreign adversaries and hackers can use cell site simulators and other devices to collect cell phone data in transit. These devices have also been used by Russia to send threatening text messages to soldiers in Ukraine, to block phone use in British prisons, to track gang members in Canada, and allegedly to eavesdrop on protesters in Chicago. And whether Signal can even be installed on a government phone varies agency by agency, and certainly the use of Signal here seems to indicate that everyone on this chat was probably using a personal cell phone. And using regular smartphones to convey sensitive information exposes that information to foreign adversaries and hackers. That's why during the March 25th hearing, Senator Mike Bennett had a fiery exchange with CIA Director Ratcliffe about the fact that one of the people in the Houthi PC small group Signal chat was in Moscow at the time the chat was occurring.
Is it appropriate? Did you know that the president's Middle East advisor was in Moscow on this thread while you were, as director of the CIA, participating in this thread? Were you aware of that? Are you aware of that today?
I'm not aware of that today.
This sloppiness, this incompetence, this disrespect for our intelligence agencies and the personnel who work for them is entirely unacceptable. It's an embarrassment.
Senator,
you need to do better. You need to do better.
But using Signal wasn't just a problem from a national security standpoint, but also a record-keeping standpoint, especially since Michael Waltz set some of the messages in the Signal group to disappear after 1 week, and some after 4. Under the Federal Records Act, government records have to be retained for specified periods of time. Records created by senior decision-making officials often have to be permanently retained. And this is because they have great historical value and shed light on the essential activities of the government. The Presidential Record Act also requires record retention and only allows for the destruction of records belonging to the president and his immediate staff, like the vice president or deputy chief of staff, who were included in the Signal chat, with the express written permission of the national archivist. But I guess since Marco Rubio is technically acting as the national archivist after Trump sacked the previous archivist, this is all totally fine. But given the insanity of this entire situation, I really wanted to talk to an expert. So I reached out to Kel McClanahan from National Security Counselors once again to get a gut check here. Now, is it illegal to include a journalist in your war planning Signal discussions?
You could say that. There are, of course, exceptions to including a journalist in classified discussions, such as if they're embedded, for instance, in the field, they have to know where they're going that day. But when you're talking about something like a Signal chat that is done in the United States, talking about bombing somebody else, there is no room for error in this. There's no law that would authorize this in any kind of chat. The fact that it was on Signal raises a host of different arguments over record keeping.
Okay, what laws were likely broken when this information was disclosed to Jeffrey Goldberg? And do the people on the Signal chat have the authority to disclose that information?
Now, that being said, what liability does Waltz have gets complicated because there are two possible crimes in play here. The one is sharing information with Jeffrey Goldberg. And that, for most of the Espionage Act, requires that it be knowing and willful, meaning that you know you're doing it. You cannot be sharing it with someone that you think is supposed to be there. That defeats the purpose. However, 18 U.S.C. 793F talks about gross negligence, about allowing information, national defense information, to be given to somebody through gross negligence and just being really bad at your job. That is what Waltz was doing. He shared information through gross negligence with Jeffrey Goldberg, and he allowed that information to be shared with Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, that does not give everybody else a pass, because the other part of 793F is that once you learn that information has been spilled, you have to report it. So after the fact, when Jeffrey Goldberg contacted them and said, hey, I was in that room, was this a real thing? And were these real plans that I was hearing? Every single person in that chat had a duty to go and report, hey, I think I gave classified information to Jeffrey Goldberg, or even national defense information, which doesn't have to be classified. So they're on the hook for that. Now, the second crime that Waltz could have committed is 793D. And 793D is when an authorized holder of classified information or national defense information disseminates it generally to a place that was not supposed to get it, but also disseminates it through a means that's not supposed to get it. So if you imagine that there are two coworkers in a classified facility and they go down the street to a restaurant for lunch, they go to an Outback Steakhouse, and they decide to talk about work at the table, they are violating 793D if they talk about national defense information over the lunch table, even if nobody is around, because they don't know for sure that nobody is listening. They don't know that there isn't a CCTV camera that can be capturing their words. They don't know for sure that they weren't followed there by a reporter or a Russian spy trying to eavesdrop on them. And so they have put the information out there into the universe in a facility that it was not protected from. Signal is just such a facility. You cannot talk about classified information over unsecure lines. You can't talk about classified information on the phone, on the cell phone, even on an encrypted cell phone. You have to talk about it on special lines that are set up, for instance, in the embassies and in the house of the SecDef and the house of the Secretary of State and the house of the Director of the CIA.
Let's talk about Signal. To me, one of the scariest things about this is that no one on the Signal chat said, hey, we should move this discussion to a secure channel. It really seems like they use Signal all the time. Is the use of Signal itself a violation of any laws? And putting aside the issues with Signal, does any of this comply with federal records keeping requirements?
So the standard for deciding whether or not you had the requisite sort of mental reasoning to commit the crime in the Espionage Act is not mens rea. It is more of this you should have known better idea. It's called scienter, but we won't go into that. The idea that they would have to have known better than to use Signal would be critical if any of them were actually being prosecuted. And the answer is yes, they should have known better than to use Signal. In fact, just last month, an email went out to every person in the DoD saying, don't use Signal. Signal has vulnerabilities. It is probably the most secure thing that we on the outside can use, but it's not secure enough for war plans. And so they should have known better than to use Signal because at least Pete Hegseth received an email saying that he should have known better.
We've talked previously about Hillary's emails. Can you give us a quick refresh of that situation and how it compares to this one?
So Hillary Clinton had a private email. It was called clintonemail.com domain. And when she was Secretary of State, she stored emails on these. She received emails at this domain. And it was in a private server that was in her house. I believe it was in the basement. There was some to do about this. People were asking, but what about her emails? And they were all extremely polite and thoughtful, as one would expect. And there were hearings before Congress. There were hearings before the media. There were speeches given by people running against her for president about how she should be locked up. And as a result of this thoughtful inquiry into her email server, she was not elected president of the United States. So that was what happened when you had some emails that were not known to be classified at the time, but were still arguably sensitive, were found on a device that was outside of the government control. This is text messages that are known to be sensitive, if not outright classified. I guarantee you that if people filed a FOIA request for these records, they would be denied as classified. In fact, I have done so for one of my clients. And regardless of what the White House press secretary says, they were not the type of thing that you blast into the open. So yeah, they're a little different. The key difference, though, between the two scenarios is that one was heavily investigated and interrogated and the other will probably not be. That's probably the biggest difference.
Why do we have laws like the Espionage Act that protect government secrecy?
For all that there's a ton of information overclassified and kept secret, and pretty much anyone who knows anything about anything will tell you that, there are still some things that we all agree should be kept secret. And that is because when you're talking about warfighters, when you're talking about military plans, when you're talking about nuclear weapon designs, when you're talking about what computers we have bugged in the Kremlin and what ministers we have on our payroll in the Ministry of State Security in China, those things need to be kept secret, because if they get out, people die.
What's the point of federal records retention laws?
The Freedom of Information Act, while not a records preservation law, is illustrative in this because the Supreme Court has said that the point of it is so that the people can know what their government is up to. That is critical in a democratic form of government. In a democracy, you have to know what your leaders are doing in your name. The flip side of that is if they destroy the records of what they are doing in your name, you can never know about it.
So here's a scary thought. Does any of this matter if the Trump administration just decides not to prosecute anyone?
As a legal matter, no. It will have no substantial effect whatsoever because the executive branch can prosecute or not prosecute. They can choose not to prosecute someone who is buds with the president, and they can choose to prosecute someone who is buds with the other guy. As a practical matter, it will be much more difficult going forward for people on the Republican side to continue to say how much they value classified information.
Thanks, Cal. As always, you can support the good work that the National Security Counselors are doing, including filing FOIAs and representing government whistleblowers, by clicking on the link below. Now, all this raises incredibly troubling questions, like what other meetings have they had outside of secure channels? Are there other instances where non-cleared individuals have been invited to classified or national security conversations? In the March 25th congressional hearing, the Trump administration witnesses indicated that the National Security Council was looking into the matter, but it seemed unlikely that there will be any accountability. But hopefully Congress takes this issue up, as they promised in the hearing, and hopefully Kel gets access to a whole bunch of more messages and finds out if they were actually using their personal cell phones or not. But I guess all of this is a lesson that you can never be too careful online. And if you care about online security more than the Secretary of Defense, that's where today's sponsor NordVPN comes in. Because you know that incognito mode isn't actually incognito, right? With NordVPN's no logs policy, your internet service provider doesn't get to snoop on what you're searching, and neither does NordVPN. I especially like to use Nord when I'm using unfamiliar networks, like free Wi-Fi at cafes and airports. It comes with a whole suite of threat protection tools. For example, if you follow some of your favorite creators on social media, you might have heard of the stories of a channel getting hacked, basically a creator losing access after a successful attack or a leaked password. This happens way too often. But NordVPN's threat protection includes specific features to warn you about phishing links, as well as features like a blocker for malicious ads and dark web monitoring to alert you if your passwords have been leaked. And of course, Nord is a great VPN. With Nord, you can surf the web anonymously, and your location always stays private. It allows me to set my location all over the world, which lets me access different versions of my favorite websites. And when I'm out of the country and try to connect to my Gmail or a bunch of other things that I'm logged into, all those accounts would usually freak out and tell me that I'm being hacked. But now I just reroute my connection to the US, and my Gmail and everything else is happy. And not only is Nord the fastest VPN on the planet, but you also get 24/7 customer support to help you whenever you need it, and a 30-day money-back guarantee for all users. So if you'd like to give NordVPN a try, click on the link that's on screen or down in the description now. Every purchase of the 2-year plan will receive 4 bonus months on top, and it's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So click on the link below to get 4 months free and a huge discount with a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. And after that, click on this link over here for more Legal Eagle, or I'll see you in court.